Well, hey, First Church, hopefully you guys are doing well. So glad you chose to carve out some time and worship with us today. And if you're new, my name's Chad. We are especially excited that you are here today. In addition to the great crowd that we have here on site, we have a whole bunch of people joining us online as well, such as Jerry and Joanne and Cherokee and a whole bunch of others. So if you are in the room, would you get loud, put your hands together, welcome in our online family. Let them know we are excited that they are joining us for worship today. And I've got a couple things I want to say before we dive into the message. And the first is this. I just want to give a thank you. Thank you to our church family for being the church this week. You know, we say that we are a church that loves Jesus and loves like Jesus. And our church put that into action because you guys know bad storms hit our community this week. A tornado hit Owasso and there was a lot of damage. And I heard story after story of small groups in our church going out and helping with some of the damage and helping with the cleanup. I also heard stories from our Love 918 team here at First Church going out and helping people in need. So just thank you for being the church this week, for unleashing a revolution of God's love. And if you do know somebody who is still struggling right now because of the damage that the storm caused, feel free to reach out to our church office. We would love to see if we could help in some way. But also I want to mention that Easter, which you already heard, is 2 weeks away. And what that means is we need you because this is a great opportunity for us to also unleash the love of Jesus on our community, as we will have people here to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of Jesus Christ, maybe for the first time ever. And so we're offering 6 services. You guys know about that. And one way that you can help is, people have asked me, if it really doesn't matter what service my family goes to, which would be the best or to make room for more people? Well, that would be the 12:45 on Sunday service. It's the afternoon service. And so if you're able to go to that service, I would make room at some of our others. If you can't go to that one, we definitely want you to come to one of our services. Don't misunderstand me in that. But if you're able to come to the 12:45, that would make more room for others. And of course, we need people to serve at all of those services. And it's just a great opportunity for us to unleash God's love on people who are going to be here and experience the love of Jesus, like I said, maybe for the very first time. But also it's a great opportunity to invite people to come and hear about Jesus, because more people will accept an invitation to church on Christmas and Easter than any other time of the year. And we want you to invite people Oklahoma style. Now, I saw this posted on social media a few years ago, and it said this: what it's like living in Oklahoma. And it's a dishwasher full of those stadium cups, like from Hideaway Pizza or from Eskimo Joe's. And I get that, because after a year of living in Oklahoma, this is what the inside of one of my cabinets looks like. I mean, I get it. I understand. In my family, we drink out of these cups all the time. In fact, we have way too many of them, honestly. But we want you to have some of this Oklahoma china right here for you to take and invite other people to come to church for Easter. And so we have First Church Stadium cups, First Church Oklahoma china that you can get today as you leave. And so you can get one of these cups on the way out. Get 4 or 5 of these cups. And then they're empty. It's just the cups. If you will provide maybe some candy or snacks or something, put those in there with an invite card to our Easter services, and go and take these to a coworker, somebody you're in school with, a teammate, neighbor, family member, whoever, and invite them to come to Easter. And this is an easy way to do it, because sometimes people will tell me, I just don't know the right words to invite somebody to church. People love a gift. So just go up to them and be like, hey, we'd love to have you at Easter, and hand them the cup full of goodies. They're going to love it, okay? So this is a great opportunity. Take as many as you need as you leave today, and let's invite people to hear the good news of the resurrection of Jesus this Easter. I'm excited. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait, and hopefully you're excited as well. And I'm also pumped because today we are continuing in our Easter series, This is the Way. And the reason why we called our series This is the Way is because Jesus came to give us the way to life. Because before Jesus, we didn't have that way. Before Jesus, we were stuck and trapped in our sin. But Jesus came to give us the way to life. And that's why Jesus says in John 10:10, I came to give life in all its fullness. See, Jesus came to give us more life, better life, deeper life, more meaningful life than we could ever imagine. He came to give us lasting life with purpose, eternal purpose. He came to give us life with God, the life that we were created to live. And this is a life that this world around us can't offer us, and it's a life that we don't deserve. It's a life that we can't earn. But Jesus gives us this path to life freely if we will choose to follow him. That's why Jesus also says in John chapter 8, if you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness. In other words, you won't have to stumble around in darkness anymore like everybody else in the world is stumbling around, because you will have the light that leads to life. But I get it. You will only follow someone if you trust them. You will only follow someone if you know that they are for you. And one of the questions that we've been asking in this series is, who is Jesus? Because who he is changes everything. And what I want you to walk away from this message today knowing is this truth about Jesus. Jesus is for you. And Jesus came to let us know that God is for us. Now, that may not be the image or the picture that you have of God, because a lot of people have a misconception about God, that God's like out to get them or trap them or punish them, that that's what God is all about. And so people spend their entire lives running from God, running from a God that they don't even know. And they fear that if God ever catches up with them, then life as they know it is over. But the opposite is true. God is for us, and so he came to give us life that we don't have right now because we are stuck in enslavement to our sin. And so what we need to know today is what Paul tells us in the book of Romans when he says, if God is for us, who can be against us? Can you say those 4 words in green with me out loud? God is for us. On the count of 3, here we go. 1, 2, 3. God is for us. Maybe that's what you need to hear today. Maybe you've never heard that before, but it's true. Maybe you've heard that before, but you've forgotten it. Maybe you haven't forgotten it, you just struggle to believe it. But whatever the case may be, I know there are people listening to this message right now who need to hear those 4 words. God is for you. God is for us. And we're gonna look at a woman today in the Bible, John chapter 8, who needed to hear that message as well. John chapter 8 begins with a setup. It's a setup where some of Jesus' enemies are trying to trap him, trying to get him. The Pharisees, the teachers of the law, want to discredit Jesus. Now, sometimes when people set you up and catch you off guard, it can be funny and comical. You know, if you're just playing a prank on somebody or whatever. In fact, just a while back, my wife showed me this prank that people did online. I think it's kind of old now, but where they tried to jump scare people with the start of a certain James Brown song, I Feel Good. You guys know this song, right? It starts with this little scream. You know, and when you hear that out of context, it can be kind of jarring. Now, the rest of the song is fun. It goes on like this. Yeah, I see you guys bobbing your heads out there. Yeah, exactly. It makes you feel good, right? But that first initial scream, can we hear it one more time? Yeah, I mean, that can startle you if you're not ready for it. I gave you guys some heads up, and still some people jerked when they heard it. And so online, people were filming others hearing that scream out of context. And let's just say it threw a lot of people. Take a look at these clips.
Kom oben hin, oder? In den Schrank.
Petit gâteau?
Yes, the hell you are. Baby!
I love how he just owns it and dances at the end. I mean, what else do you do at that moment, right? Now, I don't recommend you trying that at home, but if you do, video it and send it to me, okay? I'll show it in a sermon sometime. You know, sometimes when you're caught off guard, it's because somebody's trying to just have fun or prank you, whatever, but that's not the case in John chapter 8. See, the people who are trying to catch Jesus off guard, they want to shame him. They want to embarrass him. They want to discredit him. And Jesus, he's teaching in the temple. He's teaching in the temple in Jerusalem, which is what he typically did when he would visit Jerusalem. But on this day, there were more people there to listen to him than normal because they're in the middle of a feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. And so tons of people are there for this holiday feast event. And so just imagine being there on that day. Jesus is in the temple courts, and hundreds, if not thousands of people are gathered around listening to him, hanging on his every word. I mean, there's a lot of rumors right now floating around about Jesus. Like some people are saying that Jesus is a prophet sent from God. Other people are saying he's one of the greatest rabbis, teachers who has ever lived. Some people are even saying that Jesus could be the long-awaited Messiah. And you're there on that day and you get to hear him preach and teach. What an awesome moment. I imagine it's the best sermon you've ever heard. I mean, it is Jesus after all. How could he get any better, right? And right in the midst of all this happening, we see something interesting take place. Because not everybody is excited to hear Jesus teach and preach on that day. The Pharisees, the religious elite, religious leaders, they're not happy that Jesus is there, and they're not happy that Jesus is teaching. Because you see, they're jealous of him. Jesus is more popular than they are right now. Jesus has more influence than they have. More people are listening to Jesus than they are listening to them. So they want to get rid of Jesus. So they come up with scheme after scheme, plan after plan to try to discredit Jesus, but nothing works. All of their plans actually backfire, and Jesus ends up more popular after they try to catch him doing something wrong than what he was before. But this time in John chapter 8, on this day in the temple courts, they think they have him. They think this is their best scheme yet. This is a lose-lose situation for Jesus and a win-win for them. And their scheme, their plan to get Jesus, it involves a woman. A woman who we don't honestly know a whole lot about. We're not given her name. We don't know her family background. We don't know her personal history. We don't know what she looked like or how old she was. Really, the only thing that we know about her is that this moment in John chapter 8 is probably the lowest moment of her life. I've preached on this passage before. In fact, a couple different times here at First Church. But I keep coming back to it because I think it's so powerful, and I think we need to hear it today. The passage starts like this. As he, Jesus, was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? So again, imagine you're there on that day. You're listening to Jesus. You're hanging on his every word when all of a sudden the doors fly open and in come a platoon of Pharisees and teachers of the law. And they're not alone. They're dragging with them a woman who's probably half naked because she's been caught in the act of sleeping with another woman's husband. She's been caught in the act of adultery. And they take her and they throw her in the dirt on the ground in the temple courts that day in front of Jesus and the entire crowd that's gathered there. And I imagine that woman, as she's in the dirt, is probably trying to cover herself because, like I said, she's probably only half clothed, if not worse. And the religious leaders shout out to Jesus, but for everyone else to hear, what should we do with someone like her? Now, I believe this is a setup because I believe they know no matter what happens, Jesus is going to lose out here. Because everybody knew the law. Everybody knew what the punishment was for committing adultery. It was death by stoning, a brutal form of execution. And so I'm sure as soon as the crowd that day heard that this woman had been caught committing adultery, some of them were already picking up rocks and they were locked and ready to throw. They knew the law. They knew what the punishment was. But you see, Jesus, he's been preaching grace and forgiveness. So the Pharisees think, if Jesus says, don't stone her, then they will accuse him of breaking God's law, disobeying God's law, and they will discredit him as a teacher of God's law. But on the other side, this is why it's a lose-lose situation. If Jesus says, yeah, go ahead and do what the law says, stone her. Well, you see, the Jews were under Roman occupation, Roman authority. And the Romans, who ruled over the Jews at this point in history, said, you're not allowed to execute anybody without our permission. Now, the Jews would stone people without the permission of the Romans. They just kept it quiet. They just didn't tell the Romans when they did it. They would obey their law and just not tell anybody. We have examples in the New Testament of this happening, like the stoning of Stephen. But in this situation, if Jesus says, yeah, go ahead and stone her, what the Pharisees and teachers of the law are going to do is they're going to run straight to the Romans and report Jesus. And they're going to say, he's guilty of leading an unlawful, unauthorized execution and have him arrested for that. They think this is a lose-lose situation for Jesus. And that's why the text tells us they were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. This is their best scheme yet, so they think. They think this is the moment where they are going to finally get him. And I want you to notice that they are willing to sacrifice this woman in order to get what they selfishly want. This woman's life is on the line, and they don't care that she is a casualty of their scheme. They just want to get Jesus. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to get what they selfishly want. They were just using this woman just as bad as any other man had ever used her. See, that's why I said I think this is a setup. Because how else do you catch somebody in the act? You know what I'm saying? Right at the very moment that Jesus is teaching, like it's too convenient, isn't it? See, I think probably what happened, the Bible doesn't say this, but I think probably what happened was they knew Jesus was teaching, and they knew there was a woman around who had a reputation. And so they found some Roman soldier or some Roman man who wasn't under Jewish law. The Romans didn't care if he had an affair or not. That wasn't part of their law. That was Jewish law. So they went and found this Roman soldier, this Roman dude, and they said, hey, buddy, we'll pay you some money if you go sleep with that girl over there. And the Roman soldier was like, what girl, where? Cool, okay. And so he takes the money and he goes. And so as Jesus is teaching, then the Pharisees interrupt the act. The Roman soldier, Roman man, he gets to take his money and go. He's not under Jewish law, but she is a Jew. So they drag her out of bed, bring her into the temple courts, throw her before Jesus. It's just too perfect of a setup because it was all planned. And this woman is just a pawn in their scheme. See, we live in a world that often uses and devalues people. That just uses people to get what we selfishly want. And we almost expect that from the world that we live in. But I want you to pay careful attention. These were the religious people doing that. It's a warning to us that if we're not careful, we can be so blinded by our own selfishness that we miss the intrinsic worth of the people around us. See, they don't care about this woman at all. All they care about is their own selfish desires. But even though this was probably a setup, what we need to keep in mind is this woman was still guilty. I mean, she had still committed the act. She still chose to have the affair. She's not innocent. This isn't the story about the woman accused of committing adultery and she's innocent until proven guilty. No, this is the story of the woman caught in the act of adultery. So she's guilty and she knows what's coming next. She knows death awaits her. She knows she is getting ready to be stoned. She may have even seen it happen to someone else before. And in that moment, as she waits for Jesus to give an answer about what to do, I'm sure the only thing that she is filled with, shame and regret. Because that's what sin does. See, you can get by with sin for a while, but eventually, sin leads to shame and regret. I mean, it may take a while, and you may think that you're getting by with it, but eventually, sin always leads to shame and regret. And we all know that. I mean, that's nothing new. In fact, the Bible even gives us this warning right here. Your sin will find you out, Numbers 32:23. We know that when we make bad decisions, there are consequences to those bad decisions. We know that. We know that there are consequences to sin. So my question is, if we know this, why do we keep on doing it? Why do we keep on sinning? Well, if you've heard me preach on this text before, you know my answer. Why do we continue to sin? Because it's fun. Now, if you're new to church or new to this church, you probably didn't expect to hear the preacher today say sin is fun, but it is. I'm just being real with you, okay? Sin is fun. If it wasn't fun, then we wouldn't do it. And if it's not fun, you're probably doing it wrong, honestly, okay? Sin is fun until it's not. Sin is fun until you get caught. Sin is fun until it's exposed. Sin is fun until you have to face the consequences of your sin. Sin is fun until somebody gets hurt. When I turned 16, my first car was a 1989 Buick LeSabre. This is what that bad boy looked like, okay? That was my first car, but this is not the actual, Buick LeSabre that I drove, just a picture I found online, but it looked close to that, okay? And yeah, that car is fire, isn't it? I mean, that car is awesome, right? Now, here's the thing. I was one of the first in my class to actually have a car, so nobody made fun of it because nobody else had wheels. I was the only one that had a car, so it was cool, and I loved it, and I drove that car everywhere, as ugly as it was. I drove that car everywhere. And one day after school, a girl that I liked asked me to drive her home. And my parents had a rule that if I ever was to drive somebody home or drive somebody anywhere, that I was to call and ask them, tell them about it. And also whoever I was driving home needed to tell their parents as well. So she called her mom, I called my mom, both moms were okay with it, and I drove her home. And my mom said, okay, you can drive her home, but go to her house and don't make any stops. And I was just like, okay, I can do that. And I obeyed my mom. Now, I took the long way home, and I made a few detours, but I did take her to her house, and I didn't make any stops. But on the way there, we had some fun. And I was driving way too fast on roads that were kind of wet, but it was fun, and she was having a good time. I was having a good time. I was trying to impress her until I went down a hill that had a stoplight at the bottom of it, and the light turned red. I was going way too fast, tried to hit my brakes when the light turned red, couldn't stop, and I rear-ended. I went right into the back of a big old truck. Now, it didn't hurt the truck. It was like a tank. But my Buick LeSabre, the whole front end was smashed in. And not only was I embarrassed because I had this girl that I liked beside me in the car, I then had to call my dad. And my dad didn't know anything. I called and asked my mom to take this girl home. My dad didn't know anything. So I called him. I tried to explain what was going on. He's like, what happened? I was like, I don't know, Dad. I was trying to stop, and I think the brakes went out or something. I'm just trying to make every excuse in the world. I'm 16 and I'm dumb, So I'm just trying to make all these excuses. He's not buying. He's like, no, start from the very beginning and tell me exactly what happened. And I said, well, there was this girl that I was taking home. He said, wait a second. You were taking a girl home? And I was like, yeah. He said, you don't have to say anymore. I know what happened. Okay, I'll be right there. He knew right away that I was just being an idiot. He knew I was being dumb. And that's why I wrecked. Driving way too fast in a car with a girl that I liked beside me was a lot of fun until it wasn't. And that's how sin works. Sin, it's a whole lot of fun until you get a DUI. It's a whole lot of fun until your spouse leaves you. It's a whole lot of fun until you flunk out of school. It's a whole lot of fun until people you love get hurt. It's a whole lot of fun until your family and friends find out. Sin's always fun until it's not. And in John chapter 8, this woman's sin has found her out. And everybody is waiting for Jesus to respond because they've asked the question, what should we do with someone like her? And the crowd is waiting with rocks in hand. But Jesus doesn't give a verbal response. Instead, this is what Jesus does. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. That's a little weird. I mean, honestly, at least at first glance. A woman's life is on the line. Jesus is being set up by his enemies. And he starts to doodle in the dirt? I mean, what's that all about? Well, look at 3 words here. Jesus stooped down. Why? Because that's where she was. He got down where she was, in the dirt. And why was Jesus writing on the ground? That's where her eyes were. She's full of shame. Her head is down. And Jesus gets down in the dirt with her. And I think he's writing a message for her to see. See, we serve a God who gets down in the dirt with us. Isn't that the whole reason why Jesus came? Jesus gave up his seat in heaven to come to earth to be a man like us. He entered our mess, the mess that we created, the mess that we caused, because he knew he had the way out of the mess. And Jesus was willing to get down in our mess, get down in the dirt with us so that he could lift us up out of it. It's the whole reason why he came. Because God isn't afraid of our mess. You might be afraid of your mess. You may think there's no way out. You may think there's nothing that can be done. God isn't afraid of your mess. God is bigger than your mess or my mess. And that's why he's willing to come and get down in the dirt with us. You know, people always ask me, they say, whenever I preach on this text, they say, what was Jesus writing in the dirt anyway? Do you want to know what my deep theological answer is? I have no earthly idea. I don't have a clue what Jesus was writing in the dirt. The Bible doesn't tell us. I think if God wanted us to know, he would tell us. But I do believe that whatever he was writing to her. See, I've heard people say, well, I think that Jesus was writing down all the sins of the men who were gathered there on that day accusing her. Okay, I think that would take a really long time even for Jesus to write down everybody's sins, you know? And could everybody even see it? There's a crowd of hundreds, if not thousands of people gathered there. Could everybody even see what he was writing in the dirt? And I've heard people say, well, maybe he was writing down the 10 Commandments because he was just reminding everybody, we've all broke the 10 Commandments. Again, writing down all 10 Commandments in the dirt, that would take a really long time. And again, I don't think everybody would even be able to see what he was writing. I think whatever he was writing was to her. Maybe John, who is recording this passage, this scene, didn't even know what he wrote. Maybe it was just for her, because that's where her eyes were. And I think whatever he wrote, which we don't know, but I think whatever he wrote, he was reminding her, you matter to God, you matter to me. Everybody else may be throwing you aside. Everybody else may be ready to condemn you. Everybody else may be ready to throw a rock at you, but you matter to me. And I think Jesus wants every one of us to know that truth today as well. Guys, you matter to Jesus. And if you ever question that, just look to the cross. There is a cross that stands in history that speaks to your worth and your value, because God loved you so much, he sent his son to the cross so that you could live. Don't ever question whether or not God loves you. God is for you. And we know it because of the cross. Jesus didn't have to go to the cross, but he chose to do so that he could stand in our place. and received the punishment that we deserve. That's why Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, God made him, speaking of Jesus, who had no sin, to be sin for us, so that in him we might become what we did not deserve to be, the righteousness of God. And so while Jesus is doodling in the dirt, the Pharisees are still waiting for an answer. And the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, they get impatient. And the text goes on to say this: they kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. And when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. They keep demanding an answer. They're ready to throw their rocks. And Jesus says, okay, go ahead, stone her. And they're ready to throw, and Jesus says, oh, hang on just 1 second. Let the one who's never sinned get us started. And in that moment, everybody who had a rock ready to throw pauses. And their arms go from here to here. And the scripture says, one by one, starting with the oldest, they walked away. And all you could hear was this. Do you know what that is? That's the sound of grace. See, grace is heard when we drop rocks rather than throw them. And it's interesting to me that the only one qualified to throw a rock on that day did not have one in his hand. See, Jesus says in order to throw a rock, you got to be perfect. And the only one who is standing there perfect, the only one who's ever lived that was perfect, didn't have a rock in his hand. Now, on the flip side of that, the only one qualified to take a rock for us is the one who is perfect, who's never sinned. And not only did Jesus choose not to throw a rock, Jesus also chose to take our rock for us. That's why he went to the cross. He suffered and died in our place so that we could be made right with God. And that's why I keep in my office a rock just like this one, to remind me that I'm not qualified to throw rocks at anyone. No matter how mad they make me, no matter how annoying they are, no matter what they do, I'm not qualified to throw a rock at anyone. But it also reminds me when I get down on myself and start to beat myself up and I'm full of shame and regret, I can remember that Jesus took the rock that I deserved for me. And this passage reminds us that we don't have to stay where we are. I mean, look at what it says. It says, then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? I love the sarcasm of Jesus here. Where are they? Is there nobody perfect around? You know, I love his sarcasm. And then he goes on to say, she says, no, Lord. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. What's he saying? You don't have to stay where you're at. You've been living a life in the dirt. You've been living a life of sin. You've been living a life that's been leading to destructive behavior, and you don't have to stay there anymore. I came to show you a new way of life. See, what we need to remember is Jesus did not come to condemn us. Jesus came to be condemned for us, and that's what he's letting this woman know. I didn't come to condemn you. I came to be condemned for you. I came to take your rock for you, and he was getting ready to do that on the cross. Jesus didn't come to condemn us. Jesus came to change us, to give us a new way of life where we can live under the grace of God. And if you don't believe me, listen to what the Bible says. In the Gospel of John, it says this: God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save it, to rescue it, to redeem it through him. The whole reason why Jesus came was not to condemn us, because God is for us. And isn't that how we started this message? Jesus is for you. Now, that does not mean that God excuses sin. It doesn't mean that God overlooks sin or ignores sin or winks at sin or anything like that. No, Jesus doesn't sweep our sin under the rug. Jesus nails our sin to the cross. He was willing to pay the price for our sin that we were supposed to pay. And that's why it says also in the Gospel of John, John 1:14, the one and only Son who came from the Father, he came full of grace and truth. See, Jesus leads with grace and lands with truth. He comes saying, I care about you, I love you, you matter to me. And because I am for you, I'm going to provide you a new way of life. Grace is the I'm for you, I care about you, the new way of life that he is calling us to. That's the truth that we are to live out. He leads with grace and he lands with truth to let us know that this way of life that he's giving us is not to hold us back or to restrict us or to keep us from really living, but this new way of life, this truth that he is giving us is the only way to really live, to live a fulfilled, satisfied, content, eternal life. And isn't this the model that Jesus, the pattern that Jesus follows in this passage, John chapter 8? Remember what Jesus said? I don't condemn you, that's grace. Now leave your life of sin. That's truth. He's providing this woman, and for that matter us, a new way to live. That's what he wants to offer you, because we serve a God who stoops down to lift us up. He doesn't want us staying in the dirt. He doesn't want us staying in our sin. He doesn't want us staying in the old life that we chose for ourselves. He came into our mess to lift us out of it. And I don't think there's a better picture of that than baptism. Because when we are baptized into Christ, we go down into the water with all of our dirt and sin and shame and regret. But then God lifts us up to walk a new life in him. See, baptism isn't our work. We don't do anything at baptism. You can go jump into a pool of water and dunk yourself 1,000 times. That doesn't do anything. Baptism is when we go all in with Jesus and Jesus does a work to where he lifts us up, raises us up to walk in newness of life, as Romans 6 says. And maybe that's what you need to do, is let Jesus lift you up. That's why next Sunday we're having our All-In Sunday. And we baptize people all the time here. We baptize people any day here. In fact, last Sunday after the sermon, we had multiple people who came forward and wanted to be baptized last Sunday, and we baptized them last week. We had somebody who was baptized, I think it was Friday night, maybe Saturday night. They wanted to be baptized, and they came out and we baptized them. We baptize people any day of the week. But sometimes you need a target. And some of you right now have probably been thinking about it for some time. Maybe you've never been baptized and you need to make that commitment to go all in. Jesus wants to lift you up. Maybe you were baptized as a kid, but you didn't really know what you were doing. You were pressured into it. Maybe you were baptized a long time ago and you knew what you were doing, but you've wandered away from God. I don't know what the reason is. There are probably dozens of reasons. But I know there are people who need to be lifted up from the dirt that they've been living in. So I hope that next Sunday is a special day. We're gonna have everything that you need. Clothes for you to wear, towels, dryers, all that kind of stuff. And I hope that you take advantage of this opportunity and this target date to go all in with Jesus. If you wanna do it today, we'll do it today. But I hope next Sunday is a special day, because going all in with Jesus is making the choice between living in shame or living in grace. And there is no in between. See, shame towers over people, but grace stoops down. Shame plays on our fears, but grace, well, it covers our fears with love. Shame says, I'm worthless, but grace says, I matter to God. Shame lives for the opinions of people, the crowd, but grace lives according to the identity that Jesus has given us. Shame keeps us where we are. Grace says, you don't have to stay where you are. Shame throws rocks, but grace drops rocks. Shame says your story ends in the dirt. Grace lifts you out of the dirt. I don't know about you, but I do not want God to treat me as I deserve to be treated. I do not want God to treat me fairly, because if he treats me fair as I deserve, I'm gonna stay in the dirt forever. That's where I belong. But I know I can live every single day in the grace of God because he has lifted me up, and he wants to do the same for you. Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much for today and this chance we've had to open up your word, and I pray that everyone listening to this message would know that you are for them and that you sent your son to lift us up. In the name of Jesus, I pray, amen.